Get started.
Mic check. 1, 2.
Mic check. Can everyone hear us?
Hey everyone.
What's going on, everybody? There is a delay too. We got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'm
All the
still seeing
wonderful-
waiting for GameDev.tv.
Yeah.
Everyone's waiting.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me mute all
Cool.
the
So,
streams.
and welcome everyone. If you're here live in chat, we'll start in just a moment. Let us know if you can hear us.
Let us know if you can't hear us.
Do I hear something? That doesn't help, Wolfie. Oh, here we go. Hey, hello. Everyone's saying hellos. Cool. From whom?
Everybody.
Now we're just going to get our audio stuff set up correctly. Make sure that my audio has echo cancellation switched on. I think that's an important thing to do. Okay. Everyone hearing us coming through okay?
Yeah. Any duplicate audio anywhere or anything?
Okay. Cool. Well, let's jump in and get things started. And if there's any technical issues, yeah, it's a good question. Sounds great. Okay. Ready and raring, guys? Shall we get things started?
I think so.
Okay. How do we get rid of this image, Tim? How do we do it?
Here you go. Just press the button. Boom. Welcome,
Hello
everybody.
and welcome. Thanks for joining us on our conversation today. We've got a special guest, Hugo, otherwise known as Code Monkey, who has a gigantic Unity focused YouTube channel. So make sure you check out Code Monkey on YouTube. And as always, we have Tim Ruswick and I being Rick. So Hugo, thanks for joining us today. It's exciting to have you here. We've got a bunch of folks who are chatting away live that'll ask some questions. Our general topic is how to get better at coding and generally just having a chat with Code Monkey here and enjoying his awesomeness when it comes to creating all things game development related. So, Tim, shall we kick off with a deep, interesting question for our special guest, Code Monkey?
I don't know about deep and interesting, but one of the things I'm always interested in with when it comes to coding or anything like that, because everybody's learning at a different spot. Everybody will learn a different language. Some people are learning Unity. Some people are learning different languages. I'm interested, Hugo, is there a mistake that you see that people kind of beginners make when they start out coding or when they start learning how to program? Anything like that?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, there's lots of them, but yeah, one of the biggest ones is really just trying to do too much. It's pretty much kind of the common mistake that everyone falls into, which is pretty much on your first game, you maybe make something small. Then for your second game, let's try to remake Skyrim. So that's kind of the thing that a lot of people fall into, pretty much trying to do way too much. So my advice to that is try not to do that. Try to do small things and pretty much just build up experience. That's kind of the better approach.
So what you're saying is don't make Skyrim, but maybe something like Red Dead Redemption is a better way to start.
Probably not.
Probably.
Maybe like some kind of horse controller. Sure, yeah. You could start
Yeah,
with
sure.
there. Maybe a character controller, then try to make the character mount the horse. Start small.
I would also like to acknowledge your commitment to Unity, the fact that you've got the Unity default skybox as your background there.
Yeah.
Very impressive. Nice work.
With a bit of post-processing in order to make sure it looks pretty nice.
Yeah, very good.
Do you think there's anything specifically with like newer programmers that they get hung up on when that might increase their scope? For example, like they want to make a big game, but is there something that kind of stops them or big hurdles that they come across while they're trying to make stuff that would maybe put them on a different path or make them quit?
I mean, it's basically just trying to do too much. So basically, you should always try to do, if you're a beginner, you should really be doing something on the scale of something like Pong, maybe Flappy Bird. So that's kind of the scale that you should be trying to go for. When you're comfortable with those kinds of games, then you can move up to the scale above. So maybe something a bit more complex, maybe try to go into Pac-Man, something like Missile Command. So pretty much all of the classy games, that to me is a really great way to start. Just start slow and constantly increase. That's kind of what I did accidentally. It wasn't a plan, but it was. I pretty much started by making Flash games, and Flash games are, by definition, always very small. So I spent like 5 years in Flash, and in those 5 years, I built about 40 games. So that's a ton of games, a ton of knowledge, ton of things, and that I think that really helped me when 5 years later I finally transitioned into Unity. So that kind of knowledge base that really helped solidify all of the basics. So that would be my advice to people: do lots of tiny things, because every mini game you make, no matter how small, you're always going to learn something.
That's a really good point though, because I think I see a lot of people that they ask me on Discord or whatever. They're like, "Hey, should I start with Unity, or I want to learn C sharp, but I'm also don't know if I need to learn C++ or whatever." And they're kind of
Mhm.
paralyzed by that decision of which engine to pick. Do you think that your knowledge and experience in Flash kind of helped you transition to Unity? You think you brought some knowledge that you kind of learned doing all that stuff, or did you had to kind of start over with your coding knowledge?
No, you never start from scratch. You always pick up something. I mean, I started programming, what was it, like 25 years ago. I started by making IRC scripts, which is a very, it had like a C-like language. So, I learned the basics there. I learned about functions. I learned about variables, how to interact with various things. So even though obviously I don't do any of that nowadays, when I eventually went into Flash, I already knew what was a function, what was a variable. So pretty much the core concepts of every single language, pretty much all of the core concepts, they're always the same. So you always got functions, variables, you probably always got classes. So those kinds of things, once you learn, you never lose them. So pretty much the hardest language to learn is your very first one. After that, everyone other than that one, that is always going to be much easier.
I have a
And
question.
sorry, just with regards to game engines, I would just say just pick one and just get to it. It
Totally.
sounds a bit too simplistic, but yeah, don't being paralyzed by choice, that is not going to help you. So just pick one. Nowadays, pretty much every engine is excellent. So whatever you choose,
Yeah.
there's no wrong answer. So just pick something and get to learning.
Yeah. That's great advice. I have a question for you about prototyping and architecture. So, the way that I go about coming up with an idea and seeing if it's any good and figuring out the core gameplay is I just throw it into the engine and see what happens with very little regard for long term architecture. And I know that some folks, when they're programming, they feel that they need to be correct or perfect or figure it all out. What exactly do I need to do? I need my list of requirements, and then I'll go and make really
Yeah.
nice code architecture so everything works perfectly. What's your particular style when you're starting out on a new project? Are you fast and loose, or are you trying to do a little bit of prediction for the future so that you don't need to do too many refactors, or do you not think about it? You just sort of
No,
dive in
yeah,
and it happens.
it's pretty much a combination of both. So before I start any project, I just grab a piece of paper and start writing down some ideas. Now, some of those are just ideas of systems that I would like to have in the final game. Just some very vague ideas, just a very rough guess of what I want the final game to be. So I just do that, just a very basic guess, and then pretty much start prototyping. And then always, basically, to me, don't be afraid of refactoring. Refactoring is a very good thing. So definitely don't be afraid of that. First, do
Yeah.
something, get it working, no matter how dirty it is. Get it working. You can always refactor later. You can always clean it up. And then, of course, with the more knowledge and experience that you have, the better the quality of your first pass will be. So that's kind of thing. When you have very little experience, the first prototype you make is probably going to be extremely dirty. But after you have a couple of games that you've already made, after that, even the first prototype will already be pretty decent because you already know kind of roughly what you're going for, what you're going to need. So yeah, do kind of a mix of that. Do a bit of planning just so you don't go in completely blind, but don't do too much. Once again, don't be paralyzed by choice. Don't be paralyzed trying to plan out 100% of the game that you're going to make. No, just plan out the rough basics, the rough outline, and then, yep, get into your game engine of choice, start writing some code, start getting something working.
Mm.
Something that comes up a lot on like prototyping and all that stuff is people ask whether they should when after they're done with their prototype and they get it working, should they start over and code it all good from scratch, or should you continue on with kind of your messy, dirty prototype and just refactor? What do you think on that?
Tough question. It really depends on how dirty it is. I mean, there are some things that, yeah, it's probably best to start over from scratch instead of trying to clean it up. So yeah, that's really going to it's really going to depend on the quality of the prototype. For me, nowadays, I can write pretty decent code even on the first thing. So for me, I would probably clean it up. But if I was doing the same thing like 5 years ago, it would probably be better off just to send that away and start over from scratch. So kind of depends on the quality of your prototypes, let's say.
I don't know if you find this as well, but for me, it's usually not as much about my code because I'm just trying to get it to work. I'm like, if it works, I celebrate and I print it out and I put a poster on the wall. Yay, it
Yeah.
worked. But for me, it's about paying attention to the rest of the structure of my project. So naming of folders and having my assets in a good location and having my scripts named correctly. So for me, that's the part that if I get into a messy habit of just sort of throwing things around, similar to, I don't know if you do much in Photoshop, but Photoshop, I think, is just an evil vortex of bad naming because I need a new layer, I need a new layer. And before you know it, you look over, you've got 72 layers that are called layer 7.387,
Yeah.
and you don't know what's going on. So Photoshop, I find really hard to keep organized, and Unity is a little bit easier than that. But still, that's the part that I think people don't talk about with coding practices because technically it's not coding, but I think it's super important
Oh yeah,
for
organization is
organization.
extremely important. I mean, it's not code syntax, but it is equally as
Mm.
important. I mean, you need to know where the things are. So yeah, that is also something that you learn with experience. Yeah, the first prototype you make, you're probably going to place it all on the main folder and not subfolder anything at all. But as you learn a bit, you'll learn to separate things. And yeah, but definitely organization. Yeah, it's a very important part in actually being able to finish a project.
Now,
Yeah.
if no one is watching what you're doing, so if you're not recording or you're not creating a YouTube video or creating a course, do you name things differently than if you are creating something that you're recording? Do you get a little bit sneaky, little bit, fast
No,
and dirty?
really,
Naming
no,
your
really.
variable I or naming, your variable
Oh God,
just
no, no. For me, variable names are something that I take extremely seriously, regardless
yeah.
of if it's a quick prototype or not. So yeah, for me, that is something that I've learned over time because I've learned painfully by having some really bad variable names, and then after a week, I have no idea what the code is doing. So yeah,
Yes.
I've been through that point, and I've learned just how important it is. So yeah, that is something, recording or not, I always pay attention to. Basically, with recording, the main thing is just trying to kind of come up with a flow of how I'm going to build a certain system. So for a tutorial, I have to plan, okay, I do this and this and this. Whereas when I'm working by myself, I can be a lot more loose. So I start by writing the end of the system because I know I'm going to refactor and then connect to the beginning and so on. So that's the main difference between recording or not. It's more on the order in which I work rather than exactly what I'm writing. Yeah.
Yep.
Makes sense. We've got a question from Elijah, and they ask, what are the best coding habits that I can build? So what are some good coding habits that you talked about variable names. I thought that fit in really
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think
Um,
that's the main one. Start off by, when you go to give a variable name, don't just pick the first thing that comes into your mind. Really think, what is this variable doing? What do I want it to mean? And try to choose a good name. And if you can't come up with a good name, then chances are that variable or that class or that function, if you can't come up with a good simple name, chances are you're doing way too much. So that is a key insight that you probably need to refactor some things. So that would be the main habit. And if you want to talk just more generally, not related to programming, I would just say just have it. Pretty much just make sure to write some code every single day. Just try to do that and keep it up. And yeah, that's pretty much a habit. So on a more general thing, just always keep writing something.
cool. Good to know.
We have another question here. That is, let me see if I can pop this on the screen. That's about qualifications. What courses, diplomas, certifications, work experience do you need to be a video game programmer? And I'll throw you my idea first and then see if you've got a different position on that. for me, as someone who's been an employer a lot and interviewed a lot of people, I don't really care about where someone's ability came from, just that they have the ability. So the most important thing is that you can show me you can do it, and you can do it right now. Not that you've done it in the past, because who knows who helped you do that. I want to just see that you can do it now. So it's about proving you can do it. I think a lot of people turn up with a degree or a diploma and say, look, this bit of paper proves that I can do it. And I think that's a little bit of a false sense of security, because the employer is then going to say, okay, well, let me give you a test because I don't trust that bit of paper. But what have you seen in your career and your journey and
Well,
your own learning
Well,
about the
for this kind of
importance
thing,
of?
you really have a lot more knowledge on this area than I do. Because for me, I never had a regular job, so I never went to work on a regular studio. That pretty much here in Portugal, 10 years ago when I was starting, there were no studios. Even nowadays, game development isn't really a thing. So even if I wanted to go that route, it wasn't really an option. So for
Mm,
me, yeah, I did attend college briefly, but I never actually finished. So for me, I'm pretty much 99% self-taught. But if you're going to work in a regular studio, then I don't know. I assume that depends on the studio. Some studios really value that piece of paper that says you have a comp sci degree on something, and some
yeah.
others probably value the portfolio a bit more. So yeah, I think that depends more specifically on the place you're trying to get hired. But again, you know more about it than me, so
I think
Yeah.
it's a
Well,
growing trend too. More and more people are just paying attention to portfolio because they're like, especially in like artist or like 2D art, 3D art, that kind of stuff. Like, you can make a beautiful, amazing stuff. They really don't care where your schooling was, right? They need you on their team.
yeah. No, I agree. And it's about ability. And this is why I think we do what we do. And it's why you've spent so many years investing in your YouTube channel, is to get knowledge out there to people in terms of how can they make games, how can they get better at Unity, how can they be better at development in general. It's because I think the three of us here have concluded that it's about the knowledge, it's about the ability, and it's not about what school you went to. It's not about what bit of paper you have. So that's just my personal philosophy, and I've seen that a lot. And this is, I think, why we do what we do. And for me, I've got 4 bits of paper, so I've seen the benefit or the not benefit of those, the cost of those, and I've also got a lot of self-taught, and I've seen the benefit of those. And if you've got the discipline, just follow video training tutorials, and you can
yeah,
absolutely get there.
that's definitely a good point. Depending on your personality, some people have a lot of trouble without proper guidance, without basically being forced to learn. So that's also something that is important. It requires a different mindset to be able to learn by yourself without someone having to force you to learn something.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
question by Games Disc. Any tips on finishing projects? I tend to get one thing working, a proof of concept, but never got past that.
I think the best tip is really just have a plan, no matter how rough it is. Just have a plan for what you envision the final game to be. So instead of just blindly jumping from mechanic to mechanic, try to get a rough outline of what exactly are you trying to do. What does the final game look like? You can always change it, but just have a rough idea. Imagine in your head, okay, if I can play the final game right now, what would it look like? What would be pretty much the minimum viable product? So the minimum amount of features that it needs to have to exist as a proper game. So try to get that plan, and then pretty much just break that plan down and start going step by step.
You know what's really helped me on this too is the Steam Next Fest and the whole push for like demos. And I've realized that like a lot of my games being pushed to actually get a demo out there of the game makes me kind of do all of that thinking ahead of time, makes me kind of boil the game down into what I think a demo would be. And then once I get the demo, it's a lot of work to get the demo, but once I get the demo, it's like, okay, I just got to add more stuff at that point. And I got a better grasp, I think, in my head.
I, I think
Yeah.
as well. And Tim, I was playing your Battle Barn Tactics recently, the demo you've got on Steam, and for me, the amount of polish you've put into it is amazing. Like
Thank
the
you.
bounce and the wiggle and the jiggle and the things just feeling finished in the amount of detail you've put into it. And I think that's a real important aspect to going from prototyping something and just messing
Right.
around to saying I'm investing in this project. Is before you put in all your features, get there and put in a bunch of polish. So it's starting to feel like a grown-up game. It's starting to feel like, yeah, I've put
Yeah.
love into this. So
That was the
Don't leave it till the
difference for
very end
me.
to make it feel good and have some of that
Totally.
slickness to it.
In my brain, like, MVP was one thing, that's getting it working, but demo was all that other stuff, right? Like, demo to me says it needs to feel like the game is finished, but this is just part of it. And it helped me kind of push past a lot of barriers that I probably otherwise would have left till way later. But now it's a really good, like, representation of the game, and I think it gives you an extra kind of motivational push to get the whole
Yeah.
thing done.
Yep. There was a question here from Lottie. G'day, Lottie, one of our regulars. I'm fairly new and have run into issues where something unknown in my code breaks something else. What do you do when something like that happens, and how do you prevent it? What I hear in this is, how do you debug bugs, and how do you stop yourself from going and breaking something and going back to the state that it was before, I guess? What's your
Well,
process?
I guess if you don't have any clue as to how changing one system changes another, that might be a clue as to you probably have some issues with regards to code architecture. You probably have too much coupling, too many classes talking to one another. So at that point, with a basically you need a solid foundation in order to be able to build something on. If your foundation isn't solid, then it gets harder and harder the higher up you try to build. So that kind of suggests that you probably need to learn a bit more about code architecture, how to manage projects a bit more carefully. So that's one thing. And then how do you prevent it? Well, that's pretty much just the less decoupling you have, the less coupling you have, the less classes call into one another and interact with one another, the less often that thing is going to happen. So that's pretty much kind of one thing of, if you focus on the architecture, those things will happen less often. And when they do, they won't be less intense. So that's kind of a tricky question, but yeah.
Yeah.
Now might be a good time, because I know. So for the context of those folks who don't know, we've been working with Hugo for ages now on a course, a turn-based strategy course, and I think probably quite a few folks in the chat at the moment have had a look at that course, which is cool. And we'll give you a coupon later on in the conversation, so if you want to grab it, you can. But Hugo, I know you've got that project available for us to have a quick look at, with the context of architecture. So I'd be really interested if there's maybe one thing you can point out in that project that relates to what you're saying just now about coupling, that if you can show us something in this project that maybe is, here's how I structured it so I wouldn't have that issue, the coupling issue. If this thing changed, it's not going to break that. So just a bit of an architecture.
Well, the main thing is really just keeping things as separate as possible. Like, for example, here I've got an action. So I got the base action class that all of the actions extend all of this. So all of the individual actions work with this. And
sorry, when you
if you
say
look at,
actions, what do you mean by actions?
oh, right. Let me actually just quickly play the game. So basically, the game is kind of like a turn-based strategy game. So kind of like XCOM, Final Fantasy Tactics. So I can select individually each unit, and down here I can do a whole bunch of actions. Like one example of an action is just a basic move action. So I can
Okay.
select the unit, I select the move action, then I can see as far as I can move, and I want to move the unit over there into that position. Then I can select another unit, I can select a completely different action. So let's say, for example, the grenade action. Then I can click the grenade there, throws the grenade, and there you go. So this is kind of
Boom.
an example of the architecture and to how the course is structured. So all of these actions, they have some common things to them. So all of these share the basic things. And looking at the code, pretty much in terms of code architecture, if I look into the base action, I can see that, well, first of all, I can actually see that this game is pretty complex. So if you look into all the scripts, it involves quite a lot of systems in order to make this game work. This is actually a relatively complex game. However, despite having, I don't know, maybe 50 scripts, 50 different systems in here, if I look in here, this one really just deals with the action. So there's nothing else in here. This is just a basic action, deals with grid positions, does all the things. So the point is that this base action doesn't know, for example, doesn't know that the health system exists, because by default, the base action isn't really connected with the health system. Those are completely separate things, and they should be separate. And the fact that they are separate means that if, for example, I accidentally introduce a bug over here on the health system, I know for a fact that it's not going to have any effects over here on the action because they are completely separate. So that's just a rough idea as to what I mean by good code architecture, is making sure that each of these scripts, each of them are as separated as possible from all of the other ones. So for example, the camera also doesn't care about the health system. The interactable also doesn't care about the input manager. So the more you keep your script separated, the easier it is to come up with those, or the easier it is to not have those issues where if you change one script and all of a sudden you find an error in another and another.
So then what's your approach? You were talking about, say, the health system, and you're talking about the camera. For example,
Yeah.
if you get there and say, okay, I've structured it this way. Now, if the player gets to low health, I want to have the camera shake, or I want to have the camera zoom in, or I want to have the camera go to the game over screen. How do you then connect those two together? I know this is very Unity conversation we're having at the moment, but to go from everything's decoupled, what's your particular approach to then have those things influence each other if you want that to happen?
Well, first of all, one super awesome thing that you should definitely learn about is about events. Events are super awesome. They're one of the best ways you can use to decouple your code. And one easy way to do exactly what you're saying is, for example, over here, these screen shake actions. So basically, I've got a script, the screen shake. So this script is only responsible for shaking the camera. That's it, nothing else. So it just has a simple function to call a camera shake. And then I've got an action, for example, over here, the shoot action. So I want, when I shoot, I want the screen to shake. And I don't want this shoot action to be directly calling something on the screen shake. Neither do I want the screen shake directly to know about the shoot action. So what I can do is pretty much just have events. So on the shoot action, over here I've got a on shoot event. So whenever the action fires, so down here, when I go into shoot something, I invoke this event. So I fire this event. Then I've got a third class. So this one acts kind of like the connection between one and the other one. So this third class, this one is listening for the shoot action when any shoot action happens. When that happens, it listens to it, and then it goes into screen shake and calls a shake. So basically, with this system, with this architecture that we have here, the screen shake is completely separated from the shoot action. Both of these don't know anything about one another. But then we have a third script, which by using events manages to connect both of them and interact with them without actually interacting with them directly.
Nice. Yeah, and what's really cool about what you're showing us here is in our very basic courses, our introductory courses, we don't cover events because we're trying to keep things very linear. Here's a thing, it does a thing. To really get that basic concept of programming of, okay, I want this thing to say, do that. And once you've mastered that, once you've understood that, you're ready to then advance to more to architectural systems that can be bigger. So events, I think, is like I say, super powerful, and something that if you haven't, folks watching now, if you haven't dealt with events, then this is a great course to get really deep into events, how it works. If this thing happens, then you want that thing to happen. Using the event system is super powerful. So don't I think if you're an absolute beginner, you don't need to dive into this next level of programming just yet. Get the foundations, get the fundamentals, understand those so that if you're watching Hugo going through the course, you're not saying, but what the heck, why are you calling this and how did it doesn't make sense.
No, yeah,
You
exactly. This course is really intended more on the intermediate level. So on this course, on this course, on this course, I basically assume that you know the absolute basics. So if you don't know those, then first focus on those basics. First, get that solid base, get that base knowledge, get that really nice and solid. Make sure you know that, and then you can do the next transition. So basically, it's always learning is a never-ending learning journey. It's always you're always learning, you're always doing things. So this is kind of how you go from complete beginner, or rather from middling beginner. Once you know the beginner basics, then you want to transition into the next level, and that's kind of where this course where it's positioned.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
I've
and
been
there's little
learning
things.
Unity, and I didn't know about the event stuff. I've been rolling my own event stuff in Construct for all the events that happen in my game, so that's good to know about.
Tim, you know what's really interesting? Because Tim and I recently recorded a course together teaching Construct, and I hadn't played around with Construct, and Tim was a teacher, I was a student, and using events in Construct is really easy. Like, do a thing, do a thing. It's so simple, and conceptually it's so simple, but conceptually it's simple in Construct and in Unity. And similarly, I've been teaching Scratch, and it's similar. Scratch is really easy as well, but I found Unity wasn't giving it to me in a really simple way. And so the concept I think in Unity seems a little bit trickier and deeper and harder to understand. But
Yeah.
events are events, and it's actually pretty simple once you get past the syntax and once you get past how to hook it up. The um the code practice of events, I think, is a pretty simple concept. So what I'm saying is, if you're struggling with it a little bit in Unity, if it's not quite clicking, then keep working through it and maybe go jump to one of the other engines just for a day and play around with events. Because then you're like, this thing just says, hey, something happened, and that thing listens and says, oh, okay, thanks for that. So
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know how construct handles events, but that sounds interesting. Making a sort of more beginner level version. I want to look into that to see how they do things different. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, for
Construct
sure.
is really cool from that point of view. I don't want to steal Tim's thunder. He's fan number one. So look at me. Hey, I'm
But
the Construct fanboy. No. It's all Tim. He's the Construct guy.
everything has pros and cons though, right? So Construct makes it really easy
Sure.
to get in and get started, but on the back end, when you make really complex games, it bogs you down. And I think Unity is kind of the opposite, right? It's like at first it's like, what am I looking at? What is all these buttons and stuff? But then on the advanced end, once you've got all your stuff set up and you got your events and triggers and all that running, it's a lot easier to manage and edit. So it's different for different scopes of games, I think.
We had a question I just want to acknowledge. I believe it was from someone watching on Twitch at the moment, just asking what language we're using. C#. This is Unity.
Yeah.
We're talking about code practices in general, but the course that Hugo has just completed and is now available is a Unity turn-based strategy course created using C#. So hello to everyone watching on Twitch, and also it's C# we're using here. Tim, do we have a link or a coupon code we can throw to folks if they're interested, if they haven't checked it out yet?
You do,
To have a
and
look at the course. And just to be clear on the course, it's intermediate. So if you're looking at what Hugo was explaining just now and you're saying, I'm nowhere near that, then make sure you work through some of his YouTube videos, work through one of our beginner courses. Once you've gone through one of the beginner courses, then you'll be ready for this course. Because it's still all explained in great detail, but you don't want to be wrestling with what's a variable if you
of course,
haven't got those basic concepts.
So the link I just popped in is for the turn-based strategy course. You guys can get that for $11, which is like 90% off until the end of the weekend. So click that link. Make sure you get in on that. You're going to make this exact game in front of us, right, Hugo?
Yeah. This is the same project on the course. So yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Looks good. It's got a lot of juice in it.
Yeah.
Awesome. What was the most complex thing in this project? Maybe back to the looking at your code and from an architectural point of view, what did you look at and say, how am I going to teach this in a way that people understand? Because this bit's actually a little bit complicated or a little bit tricky.
Well, for me, a while ago we were talking about planning. So the way I made this course was pretty much first of all, I made that very rough design sketch. So pretty much just writing on paper. Then I first made a prototype. And on that prototype, I kind of had to deal with a lot of things. Like, for example, the actions. For me, this is the main thing that is really important for this type of game. And that was really the thing that I focus much on is how do I make a good unit action system, something to manage all of the actions, to do all the things. How do I do this in one way that is easily expandable, easily understandable? So this was kind of the biggest challenge. How do I set up the architecture for all of this? And also, let me point out that I did not come up with this architecture on the first time. No, absolutely not. This was something that was iterated over time. So, like I was saying in the beginning of this live stream, don't be afraid of refactoring. Refactoring is always a great thing. So you try something. If it works, then great. If it doesn't work, you can always refactor and come up with something different. So, yeah, don't be afraid of that. Try doing something. Try improving it, and so on.
Yep. Yeah,
and the other
excellent.
thing, by the way, just quickly, was also pathfinding. That is always something that is pretty interesting. It's actually something which sounds insanely complex, but once you start doing it, it's actually not that complex. Once you understand the basics for how the algorithm works, then it actually becomes relatively simple to understand. But yeah, this is definitely another level. So we were talking about beginners learning about variables and functions. Yeah, learning how to do pathfinding. This is definitely one step above that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's good. Whenever we have someone join us on the live cast, we try to get the real truth behind how quickly you get from, oh, I'd like to do this, to actually getting it done, because it's very distorted. When people watch one of our YouTube videos, they go through one of our courses, we've thought about it a lot and come up with the solution so that we can teach it in a precise way. And I think that often people often look at that and say, "Oh, my code monkey is so amazing. He just gets there and bip, 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 and he's got it done." Can you tell us a little bit about, how much do you sit there just kind of staring at the screen trying to figure it out, or versus how much you get there and say, "You know what? I'm going to make an action system." Bop, bop, bop. 5 minutes later, there it is. Like, what's the for you with all of your experience? What's the truth? What's the process?
I mean, obviously, the final video, always keep in mind that the final video you see is after a lot of research, after a lot of work. So the final thing that you see is now representative. So that's something that I always have to say in my comments is when you see a 20-minute video, that does not mean it took me 20 minutes to learn and make all of that. That is not the case. That is only the final video. So in this course, as a specific example, I've been working on this for about 5 months now, and the final course is 15 hours. So I definitely did not come up with all of this in just 15 hours of work. So yeah, that's definitely, whenever you watch a course or a video, always keep in mind that the length of the video is not how long it took to learn. So if for you, if it takes you more time than the video to learn, that is not a negative. That is exactly what is supposed to happen. So don't be discouraged if it takes you a bit too long, because it's not actually too long. The course length is just a course length, and learning it is a separate time measure, let's say.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. A couple of questions about pathfinding in general. I don't know where the conversation started, but here's a quick one. Is A star still the best? And in
Uh,
terms of what pathfinding you use in this course and why you
yep.
use that, and do people need to? Is this one of those things with pathfinding that if it works, don't worry about it, just use whatever? Or is it like, no, 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 there's the best kind of pathfinding and you should really use this approach because that's what the scientists at MIT tell us we should use?
Well, A star is pretty much the standard. It works on pretty much anything. So it's kind of both. It's kind of use A star. There are other algorithms that are more specific to various things, but as a general thing, you've got A star. That's the main one that you really want to use. So then the bigger question is more like what type of pathfinding. So, for example, over here we've got grid-based pathfinding. So each grid position in the world is a separate grid position. Whereas if you've used, for example, Unity Zone AI navigation, if you use this uses a nav mesh. So the underlying algorithm is still the same. They're both using A star, except one uses a navigation mesh, whereas another one uses individual points on a grid. So just kind of, there's many ways to do that, but in the end, if you can make the game you want to make, then whatever approach you use, that's great.
Yeah. I have seen when people complain about A star, most of the time they end up using it like every tick in like a real time game for like 100
Right.
objects.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is usually the weakness of A star. So you want to make sure you don't do that because it's not a super light algorithm, but especially for like turn based games, stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that, it's fine, right? Because you don't need to run it 1,000 times a second.
Yep. We've got a question, might be something you're familiar with, Hugo, perhaps not, but question from Dreamcore 3D. For game engine, visual scripting versus conventional coding, what are the pros and cons of visual scripting versus getting into the editor? Is that something that you've played around with much? Have you played around with Bolt or whatever Unity's
Yeah,
calling it nowadays?
I've used Bond quite a lot, and I mean, the main con is really performance. Bond is always going to be slower, but whether that is a problem or not is really going to depend on what type of game you're making. Like, if you're making a kind of a point and click adventure game, then it's highly unlikely that Bond's limitations in terms of performance, highly unlikely for that to be an issue. Uh, so that kind of depends. It's a tool, pretty much. So whether the tool is good or bad is going to depend on whatever you're trying to make. For example, for making a game like this has a lot of complex classes, a lot of complex objects. For this, I would now recommend using visual scripting 100%. But of course, that's another thing. You don't have to go 100%. You can mix Bolt or visual scripting with code. You can mix them both. So you can do like simple things using visual scripting and more complex things with code, and then mix them both together.
Yep.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
gotcha. And I think what I've seen is if you're understanding the fundamental concepts when you're learning, it doesn't really matter which one you're doing because you're looking at the concept and in Bolt you need to understand what having something in start versus having it in update. You just need to understand that as a concept in order to have it work. And if you put something in update and it's very intensive, then it's going to be happening every frame, and that's not a good thing to do. And I think whether you're typing that or whether you're dragging lines and plopping it down, you're still getting that base concept, and you can swap very easily in the future. So I
Yeah,
think people
I
often
think visual scripting is an excellent learning tool for people who are scared of programming. If you just start with visual scripting, I mean, it's going to teach you logic, which is pretty much all that programming is. It's all just logic. Whether you are connecting nodes or writing code, it's all just logic. So as a learning tool, I think it's excellent. And depending on your final use case, it might be more than enough or might not be enough. But as a learning tool, is excellent. So definitely experiment, see what you like best. Personally, I love programming, but if you like something more visual, definitely give it a shot.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. And for those folks who are crazy and haven't subscribed to your YouTube channel, can you give us a link to the YouTube channel? Or to be honest, go to YouTube and type in Unity Code Monkey, and boom, there you'll find Hugo and his channel. But we can share a link here as well.
Got it.
So lots of great stuff in there. And what I like about your channel as well, it's not just tutorials in terms of here's how we build a thing, but you're talking a lot about the Unity asset store, about assets that are great this month, about
Yeah.
free tools and systems. So it's really, I think, very comprehensive if anyone's looking for more Unity related stuff. There's a lot that you're showing and pointing people towards on your channel.
For sure. Meow wants to ask about the importance of code comments.
Ooh.
Comments something you use a lot?
Controversial.
Or...
Controversial.
That's, yeah, definitely controversial. I mean, for me, I take of the approach that code should be as self-documenting as possible. Meaning, once again, we go back to the beginning of the live stream. Focus on writing good names for your functions, good names for your variables. If you use that, then if you have a function like multiply a times b, if that's the name of the function, then you don't need a comment because the comment, what the function does, is already in the name. So yeah, comments is definitely a divisive issue. Some people say you should comment everything. For me, I prefer to have the code be its own comment. Now, that doesn't mean you never use comments. I mean, there are some places where perhaps the function name isn't, I don't know, it's not explicative enough. I don't know. So maybe a comment with a regular phrase in English, maybe that might be a bit better. So I'm not 100% against comments, but as a general rule, I prefer self-documenting code over individual comments.
Same deal. I think one of the things that I've kind of adapted comments for that I use quite frequently now is when I'm working on a game and like I have to refactor something or I have to disable something for some other reason, like it's causing some other issue somewhere else, I'll usually leave a comment and say I disabled this part because it was doing this thing or whatever. So when I go back, I'm looking at code like this looks fine. Why wouldn't I just turn this on? I know that like it's disabled for a reason. And a lot of times it's disabled until I refactor it later or whatever, but it's just kind of like a band-aid. Like I have a lot of band-aids right now because I got my demo out. So it's like, I don't got time to fix this, how to band-aid it, but it's commented there. And I actually use little keywords too, so I can search through and find my band-aids when I want to refactor them as well.
So
but
using comments as reminders to yourself or as little notes to yourself about things to do, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Using comments to explain what your code's doing, that means that you've got
Yeah.
sloppy code, I think.
Yeah. Or it's too complex, trying to do too many things. Like it does this, but it also does this, but it also does. You should break those out into, individual functions probably.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. What other questions have we got here today? Let's have a look. There was a couple of questions about where to start. Sorry, can't find the comment here, but as a 13-year-old, oh, here we go. From Elijah, where to start? What course? I mean, from in terms of our courses, I'd recommend starting with either our Unity 2D course or our Unity 3D course, depending upon what you're interested in. It's a great place to start. It's pretty comprehensive. You can work through a bunch of projects and you can then modify them and improve upon them. And at some point you say, you know what, I'm ready to jump into a turn-based strategy course. And then you can go from that beginner course into a more intermediate course. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I agree.
Uh,
That sounds like a great plan. Yeah.
Yep. Do you have any videos on your YouTube channel that you think are a point of entry? Like if you're new to Unity, start with this particular video, or is that half of your videos are like that? So there's
I
lots of.
have two particular videos. One of them is a quick overview of C Sharp, and another one is a super quick overview of Unity. So whenever
Mm,
people tell me when to start, I just point them to those. So those are quick videos. So if you want to just get an overview of the basics instead of starting with a course that is several hours long, just watch that and learn the absolute basics. So if you want, I can post a link. So just to kind of understand how the engine works, how the things,
I
just
think
with
I got
a
the
super
links.
quick video, that can be easy.
yep. Awesome. Awesome. Cool. What do you find most difficult about the aspect of creating games, being a game developer? What for you is where you might get stuck or you might enjoy the least out of the whole process? Not so much in terms of teaching, because I know a lot of what we all do is spending so much time. How do I teach it and what's going to work and recording the video? But just purely game development, is there an aspect of it that you find requires more? Just take a breath and I can do this, or
I mean,
more
for me, the
concentration.
main thing is, I mean, the clue's in my name, Code Monkey. So I love programming, but if you tell me to do anything with art, oh god, that's going to be very difficult. So for me, the best way that I've learned to solve that is simply to use the asset store. So just going to the asset store, pick up a quick asset, something that someone who's a proper 3D modeler made, just pick that up and use that, because if I try to draw something myself, that's some of the most stressful things that I've done. So yeah, definitely play to your strengths. That's pretty much what it means. Yeah.
Mm, yep,
I would agree.
I agree. Tim, do you have any
Uh,
other questions over there you've spotted?
I see someone asks what kind of architectural pattern does the strategy game course use? I'm
That's a
not really
very
Events.
broad
sure.
question, so
Yeah,
I'm not
I'm not.
exactly sure what. It uses a lot of things, a lot of patterns, a lot of elements. So yeah, there's no one specific question, no one specific answer. It's a complete game, so it involves lots of systems, lots of things.
And I think that's probably a good point that we often people I think get to it when you're a beginner. You're like, I just need to understand the basics. I just want to make my thing move on the screen, and I'm excited by that, which is great. And then at some point, you get there and you say, okay, I hear people talking about architecture and being a better programmer and design patterns and all these magic things. Like, where do I get the magic? I'm ready for that next way of doing things. And I
Right.
think it can often be misunderstood. People thinking that you go from beginner where you don't get to know the secret stuff, and then one day you learn the secret stuff and all of a sudden you get to make proper games. But personally, I don't think it's quite like that. It's very iterative. You can make your game work by having that class speak to that class, and you can do that. But once you get 3 or 4 or 5 instances of that happening, like you're saying before, it starts to become messy. You can break things very easily. So
Yeah.
you say, great, now let's have a look at events. So it's not that you suddenly get a better way of doing things. It's just as things get bigger, you need to organize it differently. You need it, the communication changes a little bit, I think.
Yeah, you're always learning better ways of doing things, and if someone wants to learn a bit more, this is an excellent book. I can definitely highly recommend this, Code Complete. It is super long, but if you go through the whole thing, you won't become a 10 times, 100 times a better programmer. So if you want Code Complete, really excellent book, I can highly recommend it. So a lot of what I know about writing good, clean code came from this book. So if you want to improve your skills, definitely recommend it.
Awesome. Awesome. And so my son has just, not my son, I don't have a son, but the son. Hang on, back in 1 second.
Somebody asked, okay, this is a longer question, but do you use a third script to listen for and call events? So this third script is basically a list of all events calling and listening so you can keep track of them better?
Not necessarily one massive event. So I assume this person is talking about what I mentioned with the screen shake actions. So don't do one event that listens to everything. At that point, that can become super insanely messy. But just do it separately. Like for example, the example that I showed is simply linking actions into screen shake. So it has nothing to do with different things. So like the camera doesn't do anything with that. So that is a pattern that you can use, but as with so many things, you can always abuse them. So in that case, I would say if you use just one script to hook into events of every single class, I would say that is abusing that pattern. So don't do that, but definitely use it when it's meant to be used correctly.
Yeah, I think it becomes a navigation problem as well too. It's not just like some point, if you've got one script for all your stuff, you're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
have to find where that thing is, and it just gets complicated.
Yep.
That's the problem with Construct a lot of times. It's just a navigation in larger projects. It's just harder.
Yeah.
We also have a course that Sam taught, which is all about programming patterns, where he goes through, I think, 10 or so programming patterns and explains them in detail, so you can understand exactly, what the observer pattern is and what it means and how you use it. So, another course to check out if folks are interested in that level of
Yep, I
detail.
can highly recommend that course. I went through it. Really nice, really high quality.
Cool. There's a question. It's just zing past on my screen. When are we going to get some Code Monkey merch? I think it's probably the same for GameDev.tv merch. It's like, if someone wants to help us do it, that'd be nice.
Yeah, like I was saying a while ago, I am not an artist, so yeah, for me making merch that would be way too tricky. Yeah,
Start printing your code on shirts.
that could work. Yeah.
I think this is. I've got here's a question from Critic MB. I have something that I've found has been a bit of a revelation for me, because I was in the one game engine, in Unity for quite some time, and I felt like I'd hit a little bit of a wall. And then I went off and started learning and teaching Scratch. We were mentioning before Construct and a little bit of Unreal Blueprint, but the jumping to a different engine, I had so many aha moments where I saw something implemented different in a different way, but that reinforced, oh, we're doing it that way because of this way. And I actually, when I jumped into Scratch, I knew so much more. Like, it's a very entry level piece of software. It's blocks, drag and drop. It's really, really simple to get something just happening. And I think if you're struggling with your confidence, you're like, I'm not getting better at this. I don't know how to do it. I'm never going to make it. Go check out Scratch and just make things in 5 minutes and feel like a rock star, because you could do it in 5 minutes. Getting there and, okay, well, I need to have, I know how to do events. Oh, and then I need to listen to this. Oh, I need to have that speak to this. Oh, I need to do one. Oh, beep, 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 beep. And all of a sudden, you've just been able to create something in a really quick way independently. You haven't, I find once you get the basics of something like Scratch, Construct, I think is going to be a similar process. Once you get the basics, you can just go have quick wins. And I think that's a real good confidence booster. And then after you do that, you can come back to Unity and say, okay, Unity's a lot more, there's so much more power and so many more things that I need to understand, but I've got this.
You know what worked for me too, because I started learning Unity with our courses, and what I realized is after 5 or 6 hours into the course, I started realizing that I wasn't really learning. I was doing what the video told me to do. And I had picked up kind of like what the windows did and all that stuff, but I started like consciously focusing on learning. What does this do? Do I understand this fully? But the other part of that is skill builder. So we've got a little, I wouldn't call it a course, but it's a collection of projects that are basically broken in one way or the other. And you can go in and it gives you tasks. So it gives you the project, it gives you the, scene and stuff in Unity, and it says, hey, can you fix this? Can you figure out how to add this? And that for me was much more compatible with my learning style, I think, because like I wanted to get in and play with stuff and mess with stuff. And like when I have something that I want to do, it's easy for me to like go out and find kind of the things that I want to do and how to do it. But the course for me didn't work as well as like the sandboxy method for the intermediate learning stuff too. So I'll link Skill Builder if you want to take a look at that. But it really, really helped me in Unity quite a bit.
Yep. So Hugo, just someone asking for the name of the book again that you showed.
Code Complete 2.
I think your screen is flipped, so I'm seeing it as back
Oh,
to front.
yeah, sorry. It's
Code
Code Complete. And for some reason, it's called 2. I don't know why. It's only 2, but yeah, Code Complete. Really great.
Cool. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's take a last couple of questions. And just throwing over to you, Hugo, is there anything that you wanted to share with folks who are at that, beginner to intermediate stage of coding in terms of how they get better, what they should focus on, what's important, and just a general question to you about anything that folks should know from wisdom from your brain.
I mean, the main thing is really the same at all skill levels, which is just keep doing it. I mean, it's I've been programming for over 20 years and I'm still learning things. So you're always learning. Just keep at it, keep doing something no matter how small every single day. Make it a habit and you're constantly going to be growing your skills, and everything you learn, everything becomes easier and easier, and at the same time you learn more things. So it's, for me, I find that very rewarding. Constantly learning things, trying new things and learning some more, trying some more, and so on.
And what when I watch your videos, what I take out of it is, let's get the job done. Here's a thing that we want to achieve. Let's get in there and do that. And I think some people get really caught up in terms of, okay, well, I read somewhere, I read the Code Complete book and they said this is the perfect way to do it. And I'm now watching someone on a YouTube video or in a course, they're not doing it the perfect way. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And
I
so,
mean, there was a funny thing that happened a couple of months ago, I guess, which is I think it was Celeste that the developer put the code as open source, and a bunch of people commented, "Oh God, this script, this movement script, has like 1,000 lines of code. This is horrible code. You should never do this." And yet, it's one of the best-selling games that a lot of people have loved. So that is really one very concrete example that you don't need
yep.
perfection. You need the final thing, the final game to be good. And hopefully, the better practices will help you reach that in a better way. But what matters is the final thing. Is the final game good? Is it good to play? Do your players enjoy it? Then congratulations, you've succeeded.
Yeah, it's pretty common to look at the games that launch on Steam or Xbox, whatever, and be like, those guys know something I don't, and they do code perfectly, and my code's bad. But I guarantee you, every game has shipped with some kind of hackery or weirdness in it. Games don't get shipped without them. Like, it's just, that's part of the process in tech. So, yeah.
In my book, if it works, then it's done correctly. And there's a lot of purists out there who don't enjoy that conversation. And also, I've got a very good friend who makes web apps, and his daughter has been learning how to do web apps recently. And so she's learning the latest technology from the latest source, and he learned whatever 5 or 10 years ago. And so he's been helping her out, and she'll say, "Can you help me with this?" And he'll do whatever 30 lines of code to do a thing. And she'll look at him and say, "What's wrong with you? Nowadays, you can do it with these 3 lines because there's this better way of doing it." And the guy's very successful, but he has a way to do it that he knows how to do it because that's what he learned and it works for him. So don't be precious if your way works, but someone else comes along and says, "Oh, you're doing it the dumb way." It's like, there is, in my opinion, there's no such thing as the dumb way if you're making progress and you're getting your thing done. So I know we talk about this a lot on this channel. It's like, do what works. Don't feel bad if someone's saying there's a better way to do it, because there's always going to be someone who has a better way of doing it. So just do it
It's
your
not
way.
even a question of being better. There are always a million ways of solving the same thing. So that's been a bunch of the questions on this course have been, "Hey, you did it this way. I did it this way. Is there a problem with the way I did it?" No, that's perfectly fine. There's always many ways of solving the same problem. So if you get the behavior that you want, congratulations, you made it.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. So we'll take one more question. If anyone has one more question for Code Monkey here today, we'll have a look at that question. We'll pick from the best of the candidates. And we've said it a 1,000 times. We're not trying to flog the courses too much, but people end up asking us about learning and courses. So we talk about the course. Make sure you check out the Unity turn-based strategy course that Hugo has just wrapped up. It's a beauty. It's 15 hours, were you saying, Hugo? You make a XCOM style strategy game, and from there you're going to get a lot of foundations and fundamentals to build upon as well. So it's a really good course. Thanks for all of your awesome work on that course.
I hope people
really
like
enjoying
it. Yeah, and so far they are. So yeah, I'm happy.
Cool. And Tim, have we found a last? Elijah has asked about 1,000 times, so I didn't want to have yet another recommending one of our courses, but oops, sorry, that's not the one. Well, we might get to that one. There we go. the best low poly course for 3D modeling. Check out the courses we've got with Grant Abbott. There's a low poly landscape and low poly characters. So jump over to GameDev.tv, look for Grant Abbott's low poly modeling. There's 2 on there that are very beginner, very introductory, and pretty awesome, I think.
Yeah, I can say that I knew nothing about Blender. I went through that course, and I'm not an artist, but if I need to make a quick 3D model, now I can do it. So yeah, I learned quite a lot in that one.
Awesome. Thank you. This question, I don't, can Code Monkey say his video line?
Sure. Hello and welcome. I'm your Code Monkey. Blah, blah, blah. Let's do something.
Awesome. There we go. There's a lot of people out there. The people have now got that as their ringtone on their phone.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Awesome. So thanks for joining us today, Hugo. It's so wonderful to have you here. Thanks for all of your excellent answers. And thank you for folks watching live who've asked your questions. Lovely having you guys here as well. And Tim, yeah, it's pretty good having you here as well.
Sometimes.
You're all right.
You're
all right for a furry guy, I reckon. Not too bad. Cool. So, and you know what? If you are interested in Hugo maybe teaming up with GameDev.tv for another course, then make sure you make a lot of noise about it. Go to his YouTube channel, and every single video he posts, when is there going to be another collaboration between Code Monkey and GameDev.tv, if that is what you would like. So thanks for joining us today, Hugo, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
We do a weird thing where we stay live for a few seconds afterwards.
Just to make sure that it doesn't cut everything off.
We haven't quite figured out this technology yet.
Because that one time we pushed the stop button and we lost 20 seconds of the conversation.
Yeah.